Hello, everybody. This is Peter and Sylvia. We are, as you know, two psychologists or therapists who talk about mental health in life in general and in business in particular. We came into being therapists later in our careers, so we've got lots of business experience, and that's why we talk about these things from a business perspective. And today we are talking about loneliness and loneliness at work, because it is a thing. People do get lonely at work, even though there could be lots of people around us. This is something, when I look back over my career, that I have never experienced, thankfully. But what about you, Sylvia? Have you ever been lonely at work?
Uh, yes, is the short answer. And two particular instances immediately spring to mind. All when I was an employee and at two ends of the scale, really. The first one was many, many years ago when I was struggling with my mental health. And I was very alone and lonely outside work. And coming to work for me was my escape from all my personal demons. And it was great to be in work because then I wasn't lonely. I was, although emotionally and physiologically, psychologically lonely, because I didn't share with people what was going on for me, because my view was it's a very private matter. But actually being in the office was great. That buzz, that community, getting things done, the place where, I thought, I was doing good and I could do a good job, but emotionally very, very lonely. And perhaps that was also down to me for not sharing my story. But again, that's stuck in that loop. It's a private matter. I don't share. I then sort of retreat emotionally and psychologically. And also that loop of my poor mental health makes me lonely. And then by my loneliness, makes my mental health worse. But then coming home from work, very physically lonely and physically alone. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end was many, many, many years later, when I'm fully recovered, and many, many years later, and I was heading up a business, and everyone's go-to person, everyone's stakeholders' go-to person, team's go-to person. And I experienced what I would tend to call leadership loneliness. It's tough at the top. Everyone's coming to you with, wanting decisions and problems and issues. Where do I go? And that can be a very, very lonely place. So that's my sort of two extremes of being lonely in the workplace.
You mentioned that it's lonely at the top, and it is. And we forget that everybody in an organization is a human being. And I keep banging on about this, and everybody in the organization is also an employee. So we should stop talking about we need to do this for the employees, assuming that it's only the lower ranks who are employees. Managers, middle management, senior management, the very top are also employees. And I'm mentioning this because I think we need to look at each other, as I said, as human beings. So it is lonely at the top, because who's there to support you? Who can you talk to? Some people choose someone like you or me to talk to after hours, or have a meeting during the day to bounce ideas. But it can be very lonely. And something about loneliness as well, you hinted at it, Sylvia, that alone is a physical state, whereas lonely is a mental state. That's something we feel. And if you are lonely already in your private life, in your home life, you take that loneliness into work, and you might not feel lonely at work, but you might still be in that mood for whatever reason. And then what often happens is people who already feel lonely do not make much an effort to get involved. They will draw more and more. So we get into this cycle of, it's self-fulfilling prophecy, really, that we get more and more lonely.
Interesting you talk about being at the top, this leadership loneliness, because what sprung to mind while you were talking there is this expectation of other people that I, or people at that level, have always got the answers, will always deal with stuff, maintain cool, calm and collected. But it's very rare to actually think what's going on for that person. and the word mental fortitude springs to mind. And it's very tough maintaining that level of mental fortitude all the time. And where did I go? I, had lots of hobbies outside of work. And like you say, I didn't have an outside coach, but I sort of had like peer to peer, bounce ideas off of those people, because I realised actually it was lonely. And I think a lot of people perhaps don't recognise that loneliness at the top. But coming back to a point you said about coming into work, in my earlier years, coming in for the camaraderie in the community. At the same time, though, I didn't really participate in any sort of, going to lunch with them or going after work, because I didn't feel, I want to say I wanted to. There was almost like that withdrawing. So yes, there is. It's a really difficult place to be, and I think one of the keys is to recognise what it is, how we feel, and what do we do about it. At the same time, they may have someone who just comes into work, does their job, and wants to go home. And because they don't interact, doesn't mean to say that they're lonely. They've got other stuff to do. And I think a lot of it, to your point, is being human. Asking people, speaking out, asking people how they are, and seeing what happens, and then deal with it, whatever the response may be.
One of the things we've both seen recently about loneliness at work were the suggestions as to what you can do in order to combat loneliness. And things like pop lunches and together days, something like that was mentioned. And you just gave a perfect example of how that may not be the case, because in your loneliness mentality, you also isolated yourself, which people tend to do, and did not want to go to the pre-arranged, let's go have some fun pub lunch type of thing to be together. And also, now that we're working from home an awful lot, or certainly working in different physical locations, some people do feel lonely working from home. Others love it. So I don't think that's, as usual, there is no one size fits all method that we can use. It's about, I think, for each organization to figure out what is a good way of being social at work. Because we don't come to work to socialize in the let's go to the pub all the time type of socializing activity. But we are social human beings, which means we do need and want people around us one way or another. So I don't think this list I saw will actually do it as a list, but maybe it could be a pick and mix counter where certain items will certainly work and others definitely will not.
Picking up on a point you just said there earlier as well, particularly now where the workplace is changing, loneliness in the workplace, where is someone's workplace? It's not necessarily in the office anymore. It might be at home on the ironing board. It might be like you and I, we're at home in our home offices. And that can be also a very lonely place to be. And I think that's one of the highlights. We've talked a lot about that, and it's working from home and hybrid working. A lot of people will like that, but again, it's being aware of that social interaction, that community, and how do we replace that when we're sitting at home on our own, sitting at home alone. How do we combat that loneliness? And even just the word combat is almost like it's a fight, but it's like, how do we combat that loneliness when we're working from home? How do we generate that community spirit if that's what people would like?
And that is the big thing, isn't it? If that is what people would like. And as always, I don't know what the ultimate answer is to this, because being forced into being together can also be quite an isolating experience. If you're already not inclined to do that, then you will turn up in person, but not in mind. So you will let that evening pass you by, that pub lunch pass you by. But yeah, you're there, but you won't engage. So what I would like to ask is, what experiences other people have about loneliness at work. I think we all understand loneliness at home quite well. You can be alone together in a relationship for sure. But when we are at work, we are also in a relationship. It's a different type of relationship. It's a working relationship. And it could be amongst a group, it could be just with a colleague in your office or whatever the setup is. But it would be interesting to hear what your experiences are, those of you who have managed to make it to the end of this conversation. Thank you. And what solutions you think would be appropriate. What ideas have you got to combat isolation and loneliness in the workplace?
It would be interesting to hear other people's views, and also what are their experiences of loneliness, because it can be different for many people.
So on that note, let's leave it over to you, and thank you for watching. Take care now.
Here we go. Bye-bye.